Okay. Looks like we are now live. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Excuse me one moment. All right, thank you. It is just after 5 o'clock, so I'm a little bit late. I was running a little bit behind, but thank you for being here. It's nice to be here with you. Pleasure to see you. Those who have joined me, do say hello. I want to know who's joined me today. So we hope to have fun. Today I'm going to talk about IELTS writing, task 2, the essay, and I'm going to talk about essential grammar tips. So hello, Vivek. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining. So, so we're going to talk about IELTS, the IELTS essay, essential grammar tips, and to a certain extent, you can use these tips for the other IELTS writing tasks, whether you're taking general IELTS, where you have task 1, the letter, or, and this will probably be more, these tips will be better suited for task 1 in terms of academic IELTS, where you have to do a chart analysis. Hello, Emil. Nice to see you. Hello, Sumit. Nice to see you. And Riju. Nice to see you all. Thank you for coming. So today I'm not going to cover all the grammar tips, because there's just, all grammar that you need to know about for writing, because that's a lot. There's a lot to cover, and we just don't have time for it. But I really invite you guys to, and strongly suggest that you guys go online. There are many, many websites that are free where you can go work on improving your grammar. British Council, Cambridge, both whom publish IELTS, have grammar and vocabulary lessons that you can take, and they are free. There are many other websites that are very good that you can work on grammar, and they're free. You can also find grammar tutorials as mobile apps. You just type in grammar apps. Same thing goes with vocabulary, and you really need to learn all these things, because it's important for you to bring up your skill. And so with that said, well, about to move on. Now, before we get started, do say hello. Some of you have, and it's great. The rest of you, we have more who joined, say hello. But if you have any questions, I will have a question and answer period at the end, about 5 minutes, and then I'll answer your questions. But I ask that you keep your questions to IELTS writing, particularly the essay, because that's what I've been talking about for the last 2 months or so. And speaking of the essay, watch all the videos that I've done about the essay here on YouTube, because I talk about how to understand the essay prompt, how to write the introduction, how to write the body paragraphs, how to plan your essay, how to write your conclusion, and then how to plan and write for each and every individual IELTS essay question type. So I really encourage you guys to watch that. Now, the last two live sessions, I talked about essential tips, things that you should not do, and things that you should not say. That was last week. So today we're going to touch on grammar, and then we're going to move on probably to another aspect of writing, probably task 1. So next week, although you guys will be informed later. And if you have suggestions, really, and I really need you guys to do this, if you guys have suggestions for me and what type of live sessions you want me to talk about, particularly in writing, in terms of the essay, do let me know, because then I'll do that for next week, if it's possible. So do give me suggestions, because way I teach, I tailor to my students. I give you the essentials and then I tailor the needs for my students. And you guys, since you're watching me, are my students, okay? So let's begin. All right, so now the importance of grammar in writing. Well, it's obvious that grammar is important, but just why is it important? Well, 1/4 of your band score is grammar. So that's how important it is. Now, the next thing is why? Or rather, what are the expectations for scoring 8 bands? Hello, Prabjas. Relating to ideas. Okay, I'll try to address that at the end, Prabja. I hope I pronounced Prabjas. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Hello, Mohammed. Nice to see you. All right, so now, again, 25% of your total band score is based on grammar. And so what are the expectations for achieving 8 bands? Okay, because all the tips I give you are to score 8 bands and higher. So let's get started. Now, first of all, you want to use a wide variety of structures. And what I'm talking about here are sentence structures primarily. Then a majority, most, say like 75% at the least of your sentences are error-free. And I actually would say more than that, 80% of your errors are error-free. They don't have any errors in them. Then finally, there are very few errors or inappropriacies. An inappropriacy basically means that it's not a correct use of a grammatical structure in terms of, say, like an error in terms of using an article like the word the. Maybe you didn't use it where you should use it, for example, and that's also an error. So inappropriacies is basically the same thing as errors. Okay, so these are the expectations for achieving 8 bands. Now, what does this mean? Really, what does this mean in terms of, to put it in plainer English for you guys, this means when you use a wide variety of structures, you're using good arrangement of words and phrases and clauses. Those are the structures of a sentence to form sentences and meaningful sentences, okay? Now, the second one, majority of sentences are error-free. That's pretty self-explanatory, but most of your sentences are grammatically correct, and that's what you want to shoot for. Then finally, any errors will be minor errors. And what I mean by minor errors, they're not going to change or confuse the meaning of what you write, okay? So what you write is clearly understood despite the error. So for instance, you forget to use a comma with a but, with the word but. That's not going to change the meaning or confuse the meaning of that sentence, for example. So now let's move on. Finally, the essay will have very few mistakes, maybe 10 or less mistakes. And again, they're not going to confuse the meaning of what you say. Now, let's move on. Now, I'm not going to go, some of these I'm going to go into, but not all of these common grammatical errors I'm going to talk about. However, I really suggest that you guys do your own investigations, do your own work, use the resources online, they're free. Spend time working on your grammar. But here are the most common grammatical errors in essay writing, and really any type of writing. First of all, incorrect verb tense. So maybe you're talking about the past tense and instead you use the wrong tense, say maybe present tense. And this is a problem because English has 12 different tenses. And so understanding the tense can be confusing. Which tense to use can be confusing. And each tense has its own unique structure. Okay. Next, and I'm going to talk about tenses here to a large degree, actually. So really pay attention. Now, incorrect use of determiners. For example, these words, the, a, and an. Those are commonly misused. And I'll talk about one of these determiners specifically. Okay. Now there are other determiners that you should learn. And again, go to those grammar websites, British Council, Cambridge English. You can learn more about those. Now, incorrect use of prepositions. And prepositions are words, short words such as to, of, on, at, in. Those are examples of prepositions, and these link words to other words, usually actions to another, to a noun. You have different prepositions for different purposes, such as prepositions of time, preposition of place. These are commonly misused a lot. For instance, one common mistake I've heard is, my parents got angry at me. That's actually the correct form. But often what I hear is, my parents got angry on me. That's incorrect. So prepositions are a common mistake, and I really recommend that you guys do study, learn more about those. Okay. And next, you have incorrect punctuation. And this is where you're using full stops, commas, and other punctuation structures. So, and I'm going to talk about this as well. So now let's move on. Now, how do you to improve in these areas? And I talked about this. I've already talked about this, but to give you more ideas, visit websites that teach grammar. And, I've already said this. Many are free. Many are free. And, and many have exercises that you can do that you can practice from, okay? And don't be afraid to do those. You will be helping your grammar. Next is, if you want, purchase grammar books or ebooks. And then some of these ebooks, you'll have to do some searching, and I don't know of any that I could recommend, but some of these are available online for free. Okay, you just need to search for them. Okay, and then finally, and most important of all, practice writing and compare. Oh, well, actually, this is not the last one, but this is an important point. Practice writing and compare your writing to others. Now, there are websites that you can go to, and we certainly here at My IELTS Tutor have sample essays that you can compare your own work to 9-band essays. Okay, if you don't want to use those, you can search online for sample essays as well. Okay, and access to those are, for many, access is free. But do use that, if you're a student here of My IELTS Tutor, do use that resource that we have. We have a 9-band essay bank. Just ask your tutor. Okay? And then finally, spend time editing your work. Don't just write and then do nothing with it. Spend time correcting your mistakes. That's how you're going to really, really learn. Okay? And that's important, because if you don't learn from your mistakes, you're going to end up making the same mistake time and time again. And when it comes time to taking the test, you will have a lot of errors, and your band score is going to be lower than what you would hope. So spend time editing your writing. And I'm also going to tell you a little secret, okay? The IELTS examiners do expect you to edit your work, spend time editing your work at the end of your writing. It's an expectation, and you need to save time for that, all right? So that is the important point here. Now let's move on. Now here are 7 essential grammar rules to score 7+ bands. So I've researched this on the internet. These will get you 7 bands, and then working on your grammar in the other areas that we just talked about will bring you up to 8 bands, okay? But these will certainly secure you 7+ bands, okay? So our first one is using the simple aspect, and we'll talk about each and every one of those. So using the simple aspect. Next is simple past and present perfect tenses. We're going to talk about that, okay? And when I talk about the simple aspect, I'm talking about tense here. Now, our third one is passive voice. And so we'll talk about that. Next is modal verbs, okay? And then next we have the definite article, THE, the, okay? That's what we're going to talk about. Next is comparative adjectives, because this is important. These adjectives are important to learn. And you can learn these online, again, for many websites for free. And then proper punctuation. That's an important key, and I mentioned that. Okay. Now, let's go on to start talking about the simple aspect. Now, the simple aspect, this is used when we're talking about general, permanent, or repeated actions. So, for instance, general, I like Japanese cuisine. Or since I live here, I like Indian cuisine. I live here in India. Now, permanent, something that's permanent, to describe action that's permanent. The Earth orbits the sun. We're going to use simple present, the simple aspect. And for repeated, something that's we do all the time. So I do live sessions every Wednesday. So I often travel to work by my car, okay? So actions that are repeated, all right? Now, let's continue. Now, when talking about continuous action, use the progressive tense. This is also also called continuous tense. So basically, this is, for example, I have been reading a very interesting novel. And this is present continuous, okay? Simple present continuous. I have been reading an interesting novel. I have been doing a live session since 5 o'clock. And then this rule here, when talking about continuous action, use the progressive tense. It applies to all the tenses, past, present, or future. Okay, so now let's move on to the importance of the simple aspect for the IELTS essay. And this is important to know. So it's important to choose, first of all, to choose the correct tense. You have to choose the correct tense. Then for the essay, simple and continuous aspects of the tenses are mostly used. You're more likely not going to use perfect continuous tense or perfect tenses, okay? You're mostly going to use simple or continuous tenses, okay? Now the rules here. When talking about general, permanent, and repeated acts, use simple aspect. Use the simple aspect. When talking about continuous action that's ongoing, use the continuous aspect, all right? So that's what you want to do. Now, let's talk about use of simple past and present perfect, because these two often get confused. So it's important to understand the difference between the two. So which do we use? So here's how we can differentiate. Simple past we use to talk about actions that occurred only in the past. So for example, he walked home yesterday. 2 months ago, I went to Amritsar. This morning I ate breakfast. This morning I had a class with a student. Before you joined this live session, you clicked on the link to get here. Clicked on the link would be the simple past. Now, for present perfect tense, we want to use this for action that concluded in the past, but still has a connection to the present. Okay. So, for example, we have, I've eaten breakfast an hour ago, but I'm still hungry. Actually, I ate lunch about an hour ago, but I'm still hungry, for example. Another example, so that's our example. Now, if the action has started in the past and continues to the present, again, we use past perfect continuous, okay? So that's what we want to use. Now, so again, if the action has started in the past and continues to the present, use past perfect continuous. So for instance, our example here is, we have been watching the movie since 2 o'clock. So I have been doing this live session since 5 o'clock, for example. All right, so that's when we want to use these particular tenses. Now, why is it important to know the difference between these two? First of all, besides being confused, there's confusion about these, you may need to discuss different events from the past, okay? So you must decide whether they occurred only in the past. In this case, we use simple past. They happened in the past, but it affects the present. In this case, we use present perfect. And then it began in the past and continues to the present. In this case, we use present perfect continuous, okay? So that's why. And you could be talking about different types of events. And so you need to have the correct tense. All right, now let's move on to our next one, passive voice. You probably heard passive voice. Use passive voice versus active voice. And you've probably been told use more passive voice than active voice. And there's a difference between the two if you don't know, and I'm going to talk about that difference. The thing is a difference in structures, and I'm going to go with active voice first, or passive voice first. Now, passive voice, you start with the object. The object is the person, place, or thing that receives the action from the verb. The verb, of course, is the word of action, and the subject is the person, thing that's doing the action. Okay, so it follows that type of structure. Now, active voice, so for example, for passive voice, these slides, the slides that you're viewing, were developed by Martin Victor. Of course, that's me. So I hope you guys like these slides. So, that's an example of a sentence in passive voice. Now, active voice is much more direct than passive voice. So it follows this type of structure: subject first, then the verb, and then the object. And it's like this. Martin Victor developed these slides. So you can immediately see the difference here. Now, the basic rule for structuring passive voice is this. We want to use the to be verb. In this case, we're either going to use is, are, was, or were, depending on the pronoun that we use or who used it. In the tense you select, and then plus the past tense of the verb. So you want to, if you're talking about in the past tense, you want to use was or were, if it, depending on whether it's a singular or plural. If it's a singular, if it's present, you use I, is, or are, okay? and then you use the past tense of the verb, right? That's how you structure passive voice more specifically. And so, for example, the laundry was finished by Martha. Okay, so you can see was here is the to be verb. Now, the importance of passive voice in the IELTS essay is this. There are two primary reasons. The first reason is this. It provides a more formal tone. And essay writing is an academic paper. It's considered academic writing. And so you have to have a formal tone for this. And using passive voice helps you establish that tone. Now, you're not going to use passive voice for every sentence, but for a good number of your sentences, you should use passive voice. And another reason for using passive voice is it allows you to, it makes it possible for you to write more complex sentence structures from simple to complex. And you have to be able to show the examiner that you can write a variety of different sentence structures. And so using passive voice helps you achieve that. Okay? So that's another reason why that's the second reason why you want to use passive voice. Now let's move on. Modal verbs. Now modal verbs are known as the helping verbs. And why? Why are they helping verbs? The reason why they're known as the helping verbs is they're used to express nuances such as degrees of certainty. So, for example, we have could, may, might. These talk about possible but uncertain actions. I might want to go to New Delhi over the weekend, for example. May I have an apple? You might ask your mother. Could I have my money, please? My change, please. When you talk to a cashier, for example. Okay, so those are examples. Must, ought, and should. These imply suggestions or obligations to do something. Especially must. You must prepare for IELTS. Okay, that implies that you have to do something. Would implies the likelihood of something happening. Okay, so these are examples here. This is not a complete list of the modal verbs, and I really recommend that you guys study these. Okay, they help make your sentences much richer, more readable, more understandable, and they will increase your score for grammar when you use these correctly. So the importance, and besides what I just said, they're useful when you want to express probability of something. For instance, this, if you read this sentence here, I have as an example. When you want to express probability, you want to use a modal verb. And then when you want to make generalizations and discussing things abstractly. For instance, people might make better decisions when given all the facts. Okay? So that's what you want to do. Okay? So now let's move on to the definite article, the. This is really important, and this is a very common mistake I see students make in their writing and in their speaking as well. So this is used for specific nouns which are known by the writer. Okay, these nouns are known. So the laptop I am using, for example, the laptop or the phone that you are watching this on, okay? So for example, the police station, these are some examples of how, of what we use, right? And these are really specific. okay? And then we use these for superlative adjectives when we're talking about the best or the worst of something, okay? Or the highest or the lowest of something. Highest or lowest point. Whenever we use superlative adjectives, okay? So for example, this is the best dish I've ever eaten. This is the best spaghetti I've ever eaten. This is the worst disaster in history. Those are examples. Now, the importance for using these for the definite article in the IELTS essay is we want to, when we're specifying specific people, places, and things, we need to use the word the. Now, there are specific rules for the that go beyond what I'm giving you, and you need to learn them. But when you want to specify specific people, so like the policeman, when you're, if you're the policeman on duty, for example, the doctor on duty, those are specific people. Places, but although you're not going to use names, place names, such as you won't say the Chandigarh, the Delhi, okay? And then specific things, for instance, the mouse in my hand, right? And then another reason is they're frequently misused, as I said. This is one of the top 5, in my opinion, top 5 common errors in writing and in speaking as well. So that's the importance of the definite article. Now, comparative adjectives, and this is also where superlatives come into play as well. So now, why are they used? Okay. So we use comparative adjectives when we need to make comparisons, okay? And they usually end with the ER, or for, and again, we do this when we make comparisons. So for example, now, well, I'll have examples coming up. For superlatives, they end with ES, T. And sometimes we make mistakes by interchanging them. That means, instead of using the comparative, we end up using the superlative, and that really changes the meaning of what we're trying to say. And now, when we use superlatives, we only want to use those when we're talking about the extreme of something, the worst, the best, the highest, the tallest, and so forth. So here are some examples of comparatives, okay? We have safer, we can have faster, we have slower, meaner, brighter, higher, so on and so forth, okay? Now, with superlatives, we have safest, fastest, cleanest, easiest, worst, lowest, highest, so, for example, okay? So we want to study these, okay? And you want to know when to use them, when not to use them. So when you making comparisons, use a comparative. When you want to talk about something that's, the best or the worst, or the highest or the lowest, for example, or the safest, the cleanest, the easiest, we use superlatives, okay? And really go and study these. These are important aspects of grammar and really for vocabulary as well. Now, their importance here is, in certain essay types, you need to make comparisons. So this means you use comparatives. So for example, advantages versus disadvantages, that type of essay. When you're talking about one view, the two view essay, okay, that's another one. Now, for when you want to talk about the extreme of something in terms of description, use superlatives, okay? But, you may use superlatives in the essay types, such as talking about problem and solution. One solution might be the best way of solving the problem, okay? So now here's an example of a superlative in sentence. Out of all the whale species, the blue whale is the largest. So whenever you're talking about an extreme, use the superlative. Now, let's move on. Punctuation errors. This is our last one. So punctuation importance. I'm going to stop here. If you guys have questions, now, do ask. Don't be afraid to ask, okay? So again, keep it to the topic of IELTS writing, and I'll answer those at the end. Okay, so now let's get back punctuation errors. Punctuation, the importance of punctuation. Punctuation indicates natural pauses that should occur. So they're used to kind of imitate speech to a certain extent. For instance, commas are used to indicate those pauses. Okay. Full stops are used to indicate when speech ends. So a an idea and that's expressed ends. Another thing is they help emphasize ideas. So for instance, exclamation marks emphasize ideas. And you might use those in your IELTS in general writing for the letter. And then they help indicate the end of expressing a thought or change in thought. So expressing the end of a thought, would be a full stop. A change in thought would be a comma or semicolon, for example. Now, they also separate sentences from clauses. This is another thing. Commas are used for those. They also use to separate sentences from other sentences, the full stop. And this makes your essay, makes your writing more readable. Because then we know, when we see a full stop, then we know when your sentence ends and then the other sentence starts. And then, so common pronunciation used in IELTS essays, okay? We have the full stop. And so the problem here is not using when needed. So for example, not knowing when to end the sentence. Now I've seen this. So, so I've seen this done by students. They don't use the full stop when they want to use end a sentence. Commas. This is not used correctly. They're not using. So they're either not using the comma or they're not using them correctly. And then capitalizing at the beginning of sentences. And then also capitalizing certain pronouns or names of places. So and here's my example. The O in bold, of course, is to capitalize. So those are some of the common problems. And then spacing with regard to full stops and commas. And I have some examples here. So and the mistakes in them are in red. The correct way is in green, just so you know. So for instance, this is our first example, shows spacing errors involving a comma. So the first one you see, there is a space between the comma and the last word of the sentence. And the second is there's no space there's a space between the last word of the sentence, and there's no space between the full stop and the first word. Okay, so that's the spacing error. I see that all the time, both in handwritten and in typing. Okay, so really work on this if this is a mistake. Now, the same thing happens with commas, same type of mistakes. And so you want to follow the rule here. There's no space at the end of a sentence or clause for using a full stop or comma. After the comma, after the full stop, there is a space. Okay, that's the rule. All right, now, so let's review. So remember, grammar is 25% of your total band score, and the expectations for achieving the 8 bands are these: variety of sentence structures. Sentences are error-free for the most part, and the errors are very few in number, and they don't change the meaning of what you're trying to say. So those are the expectations for IELTS writing in terms of grammar and scoring grammar. And then these are the 7 essential grammar rules. Simple aspects, simple past and present perfect tenses, passive voice, modal verbs, the definite article, comparative adjectives, and punctuation. So that's it for today. Now, if you want, go back and rewatch this video. I really encourage you guys to watch my videos. If you watch them once, watch them again, especially in case you haven't missed them. I have, this whole past 3 months, I've been talking especially about the IELTS essay, and I think cover everything. I pretty much cover everything on how to write your essay, from understanding the essay prompt to how to plan, how to write each specific part of the essay, and then how to plan and write for each specific essay. So, and then of course I've done a lot of videos on speaking. There are other videos here on other aspects of IELTS, reading and listening as well. And I really encourage you to watch our content here on YouTube. Don't forget to watch our content on Instagram and even Facebook. Subscribe to those, follow us. And don't forget to comment on those and share our content. So we always want to hear from you, and we always want your suggestions. Now that's pretty much it. Now I'm going to open up to questions. Read you, Prabji, you said anything about relating ideas. So I'm really not sure I understand what you mean. Are you asking about how to come up with ideas? If so, one way you can come up there's 2 ways you can come up with ideas. First of all, read. Read a lot about different subjects of IELTS that IELTS asks questions about. Particularly, you can find these, say, on speaking, okay? And that will also help you with speaking as well as writing. So IELTS topics cover home, city life, country life, clothing, cuisines, the environment, science and technology. So I really encourage you guys to read articles about those subjects. And you can watch videos about these subjects as well. You can go to YouTube and watch short videos about these subjects as well. That's one way you can pick up ideas as well as vocabulary. And when you pick up topic-wise vocabulary, you'll have the vocabulary to talk about those ideas as well. Now, as far, I'm not sure, Prabjas, I'm sorry. Maybe you're asking if my next live session is to come up with ideas. So I actually talk about that in terms of how to plan your writing. In terms, coming up with ideas, you need to brainstorm, okay? So you have to, when you brainstorm, you're coming up with your ideas. And the best way to come up with your own ideas is to read about different topics. Read and listen to podcasts on many different topics. Watch videos, lectures on a wide variety of different topics. And that way that will really help you come up with ideas. Okay? And then also you will learn the vocabulary to talk about those ideas. So it's better to that's rather than coming up with, doing a live session, how do you come up with ideas? It's really the tip here, the trick here, the thing you need to do is read and listen and watch. Watch to learn to get the ideas. Okay. And that's what you need to do. So any other questions? So it doesn't look like there's any other questions. So you guys were great. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Riju. Thank you, Sumit, Emil, Mohammed, Prabjas, and for watching. I've really appreciated you guys being here. It's a pleasure. Join me every Wednesday at 5 o'clock Indian Standard Time. Next week, I'm going to continue about writing. I think I'm going to talk about, I think the next, I just covered grammar, so I think I'm going to talk about the other aspects of scoring. So I think next week I'm going to talk more about coherence and cohesion. I think that would be a good video for that. So that's it for today. Again, thank you for joining us. You're very welcome, Man on a Mission. Interesting name there. I hope your mission is to do well on IELTS. And that should be all your mission. So again, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and here on YouTube. Watch our content. If you want to know more about My IELTS Tutor, click on the link below. A representative will get in touch with you as soon as possible. That's it for today. I want to thank you guys, and I'll see you guys next week. Happy IELTS practice.